If you have driven through an intersection lately and felt a flash of doubt about whether a camera just caught you doing something wrong, you are not alone. Across the country, more cities and states have been expanding automated traffic enforcement, and that has left a lot of drivers confused about what these cameras actually do, where they are allowed, and what really happens if one catches a violation. Some people have heard rumors about massive fines for a single wrong turn, or claims that a new rule went into effect this August that changes everything overnight. The truth is more complicated and honestly more useful to understand because traffic camera enforcement is not one national system. It is a patchwork of different state laws, city ordinances, and local policies, and what applies in one town might not apply just a few miles down the road in another. Understanding how these systems generally work and what your specific state or city actually allows is the best way to avoid an unpleasant surprise in the mail. So let's walk through this clearly and calmly without the scare tactics you might have seen elsewhere. First, it helps to understand what a traffic camera actually is and how it fits into a modern enforcement system. At its core, a traffic camera is a fixed or mobile device that captures an image or short video clip when it detects a specific triggering event, like a vehicle entering an intersection after the light has turned red, or a vehicle traveling faster than a set speed threshold. These systems are usually connected to sensors embedded in the road or radar and LiDAR units that measure vehicle speed. When the system detects a violation, it captures images of the vehicle, often including the license plate and sometimes a short video showing the moments before and after the violation. That evidence is then reviewed in many jurisdictions by a police officer or a trained reviewer before any citation is actually issued. This human review step matters because it means a citation is not always automatically generated the instant a sensor is triggered. In many places, someone has to look at the evidence and confirm that a real violation occurred before a ticket goes out. Red light cameras are probably the most familiar type to most drivers. These are typically mounted at intersections with a history of collisions caused by drivers running red lights. The camera is synced with the traffic signal, so it only captures images when a vehicle crosses the stop line after the light has already turned red, not during a yellow light. Cities that use these cameras often say the goal is to reduce dangerous T-bone collisions at high-risk intersections, and many transportation departments publish data showing where these cameras are located, precisely because transparency is often required by state law. Speed cameras work on a similar principle, but instead of monitoring the signal, they monitor vehicle speed relative to the posted limit. Some of these are fixed in one location, often near schools or construction zones, while others are mounted in mobile units that can be moved to different high-risk corridors depending on where speeding complaints or crash data suggest they are needed most. School zone cameras deserve their own mention because the rules around them tend to be more specific. Many states allow reduced speed limits during certain hours when children are arriving or leaving school, and cameras in these zones are often only active during those designated times. For example, a hypothetical school zone might have a normal speed limit of 35 miles per hour, but drop to 20 during the hours of 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning and 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon on school days. A camera in that zone may only issue citations for speeding during those specific windows, which is one reason it matters to actually read the posted signage rather than assuming a school zone camera is always active. Bus lane cameras are a newer category in a lot of major cities, and they work a little differently. Instead of measuring speed or signal compliance, these cameras are typically mounted on the buses themselves or fixed along a dedicated bus corridor, and they capture footage of vehicles that are illegally stopped, parked, or driving in a lane reserved for public transit. Cities that have rolled these out generally say the goal is to keep transit moving efficiently, since a single car blocking a bus lane can delay dozens of passengers at once. Wrong turn enforcement, which is the type getting a lot of attention lately, generally targets a very specific kind of mistake, like a driver turning right on red where it is explicitly prohibited by a posted sign, or a driver making a turn from a lane that is legally restricted to going straight only. This kind of enforcement tends to be far less common than red light or speed enforcement, and it is not something that exists everywhere. Whether a city uses cameras this way and what the associated fine actually is depends entirely on that city's own traffic code. This brings us to license plate recognition technology, which is the backbone that connects a lot of these systems together. These are optical systems that can automatically read and log plate numbers as vehicles pass through a monitored area. Some cities use this technology purely for traffic enforcement, while other agencies use similar technology for toll collection, for locating stolen vehicles, or for enforcement related to expired registration. It's worth knowing that license plate recognition itself is not automatically the same thing as a citation. It is simply the technology that identifies which vehicle was present at a certain place and time, and what happens with that information afterward depends on the purpose of the specific program and the laws governing it in that jurisdiction. Now let's talk about how an automated citation typically makes its way to a driver, because this process again varies quite a bit depending on where you live. In general, once a violation is captured and reviewed, the registered owner of the vehicle, not necessarily the driver, receives a notice in the mail. This notice usually includes photographic evidence of the violation, information about the alleged infraction, the fine amount, and instructions for how to pay, dispute, or request more information. It's important to understand that the registered owner receiving the citation is often a point of confusion, because if someone else was driving your car at the time, the process for addressing that differs by state. Some states allow the owner to name the actual driver, while others hold the registered owner responsible regardless of who was behind the wheel. This is exactly the kind of detail that makes it so important to check your own state's specific rules rather than assuming they match what you've heard about a different state. Fine amounts for these violations vary enormously depending on the state, the city, and the specific type of infraction. A red light camera violation in one city might carry a very different fine than a similar violation in another city, and speed camera fines are often tied to how far over the limit a driver was traveling, with steeper fines for more significant speed violations. Because of this wide variation, it would be misleading to say there is one standard dollar amount that applies broadly, and any single number that gets repeated online as if it applies to all drivers everywhere should be treated with some skepticism unless you can verify it directly through your own State Department of Transportation or Department of Motor Vehicles website. One of the more commonly asked questions is whether warning signs are legally required before a road can have automated enforcement. In many states, the answer is yes, at least to some degree. A number of states that permit red light or speed cameras require visible signage warning drivers that they are entering an area with automated enforcement, and some states go further, requiring a grace period after a new camera is installed, where only warnings are issued rather than fines, giving drivers time to adjust. However, this is not universal. Some jurisdictions do not require advanced signage at all, and the specific requirements can depend on the type of camera and the local or state law that authorized it. This is exactly why blanket statements claiming that no warning is ever given, or that every driver everywhere is at risk of a surprise fine, are not accurate representations of how these systems generally work. If you want to know whether a specific road requires signage, checking your State Department of Transportation's published camera enforcement policies is the most reliable way to find out. Let's walk through a few realistic hypothetical examples to make this more concrete, and I want to be clear, these are illustrative scenarios, not real documented cases. Imagine a driver named Sam who regularly commutes through an intersection that recently added a red light camera. Sam has driven that route for years and is used to timing the yellow light a certain way, but the signal timing was recently adjusted as part of the new camera installation, and Sam ends up entering the intersection just as the light turns red. In many jurisdictions with proper signage requirements, Sam would have seen a posted warning about the new camera beforehand, and depending on local policy, might have received a warning notice rather than an immediate fine if the installation was recent. In a different hypothetical, imagine a driver named Priya who is unfamiliar with a downtown area and turns right at an intersection with a sign restricting right turns during certain hours, perhaps to keep an intersection clear for pedestrian traffic. Priya didn't notice the small sign because she was focused on merging into traffic, and depending on whether that specific intersection uses wrong turn camera enforcement, she could later receive a citation in the mail. These examples are meant to illustrate how ordinary, understandable mistakes are usually what triggers these systems, not intentional reckless driving, and definitely not some sweeping new rule that applies to every driver nationwide. If you do receive a citation from an automated camera, there are some general steps that apply across most jurisdictions, though again the specifics depend on where you live. First, read the notice carefully, including the deadline for response, because missing that deadline can sometimes result in additional penalties or a default judgment against you. Most notices will include the photographic or video evidence, so take the time to actually review it rather than assuming it's accurate or inaccurate without looking. If you believe the citation was issued in error, most jurisdictions have a formal appeals or contest process, which might involve submitting a written explanation, attending an administrative hearing, or providing evidence such as proof that someone else was driving. Keep in mind that appeals processes have their own deadlines and requirements, so if you plan to contest a citation, look up your specific city or state's instructions promptly rather than waiting. If you decide the citation is accurate, most places offer several payment methods, including online payment portals, mail-in payment, and sometimes in-person payment options. And some jurisdictions offer payment plans for drivers who need more time. Beyond dealing with a citation after the fact, there are practical habits that reduce your chances of triggering one of these systems in the first place, and none of this requires anything dramatic. Slowing down as you approach a yellow light rather than accelerating through it reduces your risk of a red light violation. Paying attention to posted speed limit changes, especially in school zones and construction areas, helps avoid speed camera citations. Reading turn restriction signage carefully, particularly in unfamiliar downtown areas or near transit corridors, can help you avoid an unexpected wrong turn violation. And generally, giving yourself a little extra travel time so you're not rushing through unfamiliar intersections tends to reduce the kind of split-second decisions that lead to these mistakes in the first place. Perhaps the single most useful thing you can do, though, is to actually check your local Department of Transportation or Department of Motor Vehicles website periodically, especially if you're driving through a city or state you're not deeply familiar with. These agencies are usually the ones that publish official information about where cameras are located, what the current fine schedules are, whether warning periods apply to newly installed cameras, and how the appeals process works. Because these policies do change over time as cities adjust their programs, and because laws vary so significantly from one state to another, information you find in a general video like this one should be treated as a starting point for understanding the topic, not as a substitute for checking the specific current rules that apply to wherever you actually drive. What is true in one city this year might be different next year, and what applies in one state might not apply at all in the state next door. At the end of the day, automated traffic enforcement exists because intersections and roadways with a history of collisions or safety concerns often benefit from consistent monitoring, and most transportation agencies frame these programs around safety rather than revenue, even though that framing is sometimes debated. Whatever your personal opinion on these systems, the most practical takeaway is simple. Stay alert, read posted signs, respect speed limits and turn restrictions, and if you're ever unsure about the rules in a specific area, a quick check of your state or city's official transportation website can save you a lot of confusion down the road. Traffic laws are not static, and staying informed is a habit that serves you well no matter where you're driving. If this video helped clear up some of the confusion around traffic cameras, consider sharing it with family or friends who drive regularly, especially anyone who travels through unfamiliar cities often. Drive safely, stay observant, and we'll see you in the next video.